Today we are doing something different. I was back at Google HQ in Mountain View today, and I got to spend half an hour with Ben Gomes, a Senior Vice President at Google. I recorded our conversation with Ben's permission. Ben leads the Learning and Sustainability organization at Google and is also an advisor on Google Search. He oversees the teams focused on harnessing technology and AI to benefit society by scaling advancements in teaching and learning as well as combating climate change. The Learning team supports educators and learners around the world through products including Google Classroom, Google Scholar, Google Arts and Culture, and Read Along, an AI-based literacy app. They are also creating new academic and learning experiences on core Google products including Search and YouTube. The sustainability team is focused on decarbonizing Google's operations while building partnerships and product experiences on surfaces including Earth Engine, Data Commons, Google Cloud, Environmental Insights Explorer, Search and YouTube to provide information that can enable systemic global change. As one of Google's first principal engineers and an early Google Fellow, Ben worked on Search for more than 20 years, ultimately leading the Google Search organization, which also included Assistant and News. In our chat, we discussed how AI can help people learn, curiosity as the key to learning, the huge changes to Google Search, how teachers will guide AI use, closing the digital divide with AI, how he will know if LearnLM is successful, how wearable AI fits into the future of learning. The audio for this was recorded in a room with loud aircon. I have edited this noise out, but in doing so, it has slightly decreased the quality. Let's join the conversation.
I wanted to work in education. I chose to do it at Google because I think Google has both the tools and the intent of education, right? Because I was seeing when I went back to India, it's like there's some great teachers, but there's so much need that is sort of unmet in some ways, right? And so I felt like technology probably is the best bet for helping to meet that need. And so I stayed at Google working across Google with the different products, Google Classroom, Google YouTube, Google Arts and Culture, Google Scholar, a couple of the smaller ones in my team, but I actually really work across the teams to try and push and work with the cause of learning across these different leads. So we have a pedagogical team and so on, right? That actually thinks about what's the right way to do this to make sure we are effecting learning in these different contexts.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you know the work of Siddhartha Mitra?
No.
He did the hole in the wall experiments.
Oh, right. I know that.
Yeah.
That's an interesting.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. He actually lives in the northeast of England now, which is really strange.
Well, you don't have a hole in the wall with access to a computer.
But he does some really interesting stuff around kind of learner-led, student-led learner, and students.
Do constructivist approach to learning.
I can.
What I anchor on this, I think, traditional approaches to, I anchor first of all on curiosity, right? Because I think that's a driving instinct. We call it curiosity, but it's really the instinct to learn. And I think that's built into us for a good reason. It's not just randomly there. It's because learning is a great adaptive trait. Right. And so that curiosity instinct is fantastic. Now, it doesn't always work in a structured context because it's hard for one person to cater to the curiosity of 30. And some people can do it, and some classes it can happen, but not always, right? And so it has always been supplemented by things like books and other materials. But now with AI, it can be an active process by which you engage with the material. Right? So that you're actively engaging with the video. I don't know if you've seen this feature called Ask in YouTube. Basically, I was demoing it for the preview. So in any video, let me show you where it shows up. It's this button called Ask.
Oh, okay. Is that new?
YouTube? It's in YouTube Premium right now, but they're working on it. And so you click on this. I'm here to help, right? And you can begin to ask questions grounded on that video.
Yeah.
Right? And I think one of the things with schools is that there's so much of the context of the classroom that you need. Like NotebookLM seems like a really good fit when you're studying a set of materials.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've used it.
I use it all the time.
Yeah. And have you used the mind map feature?
Yeah.
It's really cool because it gives you these great prompts to allow you, first of all, it gives you a visualization of the space. Yeah. And then gives you these great prompts to actually plug into the space. So I found it kind of incredible, actually, as to what it needed.
I did some stuff with Stephen Johnson.
Steve Johnson.
Yes, yeah. And back when it first came out.
Yeah.
And so it's been amazing to see how it's grown.
Yeah.
That's a huge success story for you guys over the last 10 years.
Yeah. And educators in particular really like it.
Right, yeah.
And not everybody has heard of it, so I'm surprised people have not heard of it. And whenever I tell them about it and they try it out, it's such a natural thing.
I do a lot of training with educational leaders.
Yeah.
And it's the first tool I always show them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we don't go past it. We just spend 2 hours.
That's fantastic.
On that. Yeah. And I think it's so good. I suppose what really struck me yesterday was how you guys seem to be pointing all of your AI power now, all of the different tools you create, back to search. And you will have heard these rumors, like 2 years ago, ChatGPT comes out. Is this the end of Google search? All of that type of thing. ChatGPT brings out a search tool. What's going to happen to Google? Headlines everywhere. And it really struck me yesterday. And I was really, it made sense that the fact that you guys, it feels, and I don't know if this is how you are describing it internally, but it feels like you're almost coming back to the core business and by putting AI modes into search. And I suppose as somebody who worked on search for a long time, are you happy to see that?
Yeah, I'm very happy to see it. I think that for me, the journey of search has been understanding a vague need in your mind and translating that into words that can be answered by content, right? And we started with like search, or it's keyword search, and then we built in things like synonyms so we could understand a little bit more of what you're saying without you saying getting the words right. And then we began to understand a little bit more complex sentences, and then LLMs came about, right? You can understand so much more. And we're building a lot of this, like BERT was launched in search into the back end for a while. But it also needs a change into this is also a way in which you can begin to interact with search in a different way through a conversation, right? Yeah. And I feel that's incredibly powerful. It's taking you through to the information you want with the backdrop of the web. So you can go to the web to like verify what go deeper, verify what you want, and make sure that all of that comes together in a way that gives you not just information you want, but the confidence in the information you want, and so on, right? So I'm very excited about that. But I do think we're building AI into all of our products. If I see what's happening with Docs and Sheets, what I see what's happening with YouTube and Ask, we'll see what's happening with Google Classroom. With Gemini, obviously, as a core piece of it, we have this quizzes within Gemini that should allow you to do this interactive quizzes, which really a nice way to do a self-assessment of what you're learning. Yeah. So I think we're building into all of our products, and of course, since I was in search for 20 years, obviously I think about search still a lot, but I feel like it's being built across the company.
Yeah. But it was nice to see that almost. That power being put back in, really was. I suppose, I was a philosophy teacher. I'm wonderful. I kind of write, I try to make my books practical, but I can't help but go on big picture. Yeah. And in thinking about, I tend to see the work I do in education in 2 boxes. First box is like linear innovation. How do we use the tools to help us do what we're already doing? Yeah. But also I think sooner or later the education system is going to have to do some non-linear innovation and rethink some things. What with the tools that you guys are building? What do you say is the role of the educator in the next few years if AI keeps getting more powerful?
I think so. I have a personal strong belief that people learn because of other people. I have an example in my own life. I was interested in 2 different things. I was interested in geology, and I was interested in plants. Now, my interest in plants is really from a botanical perspective, but there are enough other people I know interested in plants that the interest stays alive. It's very easy to bore people with geology. And so, like, almost nobody I know is interested in geology. So my interest in plants does a lot more. And you realize that even though I think I'm self-motivated, I'm actually motivated to some extent by the people around me. So I really believe we learn because of other people, right? I say like everybody's inspired. I had a chemistry teacher in school, right? And the reason he inspired a generation is because he so loved chemistry. You saw that and you said like, there's something here that I want to get, right? And so there's that relationship with people. I think that's still fundamental. But I think in the process of learning, the tools that they have had, whether it's videos or text or whatever, have been largely passive tools. You absorb information. And for some people, they make it an active process, but for some people, they passively absorb it. I mean, I've seen students who just highlight everything, and there are all these techniques we all don't work well. So I think the nonlinear part is actually turning that into an active process across the board. It'll take time. But I think many of the tools that educators use and students use have to become active tools and not just absorbing information.
Okay. And I guess I see that kind of philosophy in LearnLM.
Yeah.
How it's not just, right, I'll talk to Gemini and get an answer, but actually, can you help me?
Can you help me learn?
Yeah.
I want to add one other thing to that, because I think like in many cases that learning, when it's active, it is something that you retain a lot better because it's active, but also your relationship to the fundamental concept is better. So I use this example of myself, right? I spent like 1 month learning limits, and we went as quickly as possible to calculus. Right. The truth is, after high school, I did very well in my exams, but I didn't get the fundamental concept of calculus, though I was good at it. So I'm hopeful that these tools can enable educators and students themselves to get at the fundamental idea, the deeper idea behind something, rather than rest with the mechanics of how you manipulate things, right? So the weight of what you learn changes, I think, over time. And the weight in educational systems, I think, also will change. I don't know, right? But that's something we have to work with educators on, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's something about traditional education. You start at step one, and the end point is the answer.
Yeah.
And then you learn that answer, you regurgitate for an exam, and you might recall it at some point in your life. I feel like now, and I suppose it's no different to having YouTube, really, but I think this is going to make it more accessible and personalized. But it almost feels now we start with the answer. And for me, it kind of feels like the education system almost needs to reverse its take and go, right, well, if all these answers are readily available, actually, how do we decide which is the better answer? Is it more nuanced than a single answer? Do we rely on it? What's the source material? How do we apply it? And it feels like if we don't move to that kind of model and we still start at square one and go, right, let's try and figure out the answer. We're not even getting to the level of how you start working with AI, which everyone is going to have to do in their work.
I guess I anchor on not just the answer, but the concept behind the answer. And I was thinking about this, and like, what does it take to get to that concept, right? So I was thinking about this with even language learning. We put out this little experiment about language lessons, right? And I had to study Hindi in school, but it wasn't taught the way a language should be taught. It was not taught immersively at all, right? So I would memorize as much as I could and try and regurgitate, because nobody in my family spoke Hindi. And it's a terrible way to learn language. You actually don't learn the language at the end of it. Well, it's not uncommon with people who didn't. But now with these tools, I think you can begin to have an active process there and actually begin to get what it means to learn a language, which I never did, and so I think that for some students who are very good today, they get that point where they actually get it. They grok it. And I think for a lot of students, they get to the answer, but they don't grok it. Right. And hopefully with AI and these active processes and the ability to ask more questions just for you, for the bit that you didn't understand, right? But the rest of the class seemed to understand. Maybe they didn't as well, right? But you didn't understand. You can ask that question. You can hopefully in the future figure out what part of your understanding is broken, right? By giving an answer and having it come back and say, hey, okay, no, you didn't quite get this part.
Yeah.
Right. So that process, I think, is where like the learning process is really wonderful. One of the things with Google, aside from Google Classroom, is that people come to us because they want to learn.
Yeah.
And that's pretty unique, right? Not because they have to learn.
Yeah.
They come to us because, okay, there's something in school, but like, I'm actually curious about this.
Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting because I think even when you were talking about, well, it's going to break down why I don't understand, how I might learn, that already assumes so many cognitive awareness and skills.
Exactly.
That is true. That, in my opinion, and I come from the British education system, which is very traditional, right?
Yeah.
And in my opinion, we don't do well at teaching those skills. So if we already don't have a great foundation of these, I suppose, what we've called soft skills, and then you put AI on top of that, my worry is that we'll see some students fly, and then that kind of digital gap get wider and wider and wider. And I suppose it's not just, I mean, that could be in one school, I guess, but we could also be talking about accessibility from one country to another as well, based on economics and so on.
I think this is a really important question. And I think that how the tools, how the teachers adopt the tools, right? We've got some courses for teachers to get teachers comfortable with AI. They come out of them feeling a lot more comfortable using AI. I think as the teachers begin to adopt the tools, they will begin to understand what it means for the students also a lot better.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's that bi-directional learning that has to happen, because I think we also, it's inevitable to some extent that we teach as we learned.
Yeah.
Right. And I see people coming from different education systems having strong points of view based on the education system that worked for them.
Yeah.
Right. But I think there's a lot of different ways in which you can operate. And I think so I think it's very important for teachers to adopt these tools and get comfort and familiarity with them, so that they know how to guide the students appropriately and use the tools well. And this is going to be a process. But it's a pretty, I think, important process that you have to go through.
Yeah. And I suppose you see that reflected in the world at the moment. Those who are getting ahead right now and implementing artificial intelligence. And then still a lot of people who, like you said about NotebookLM earlier, still don't even really know it exists. And it's how do we, and I suppose it's not the job of Google, it's the job of educators, it's the job of the education system to raise awareness.
Right, of these tools and all. No, that's partly why we do this also, right?
Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, like talking about these tools and how we think they're effective, what we've learned from teachers we work with. We're working like now with the Miami-Dade school system.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a long article about that, but it's really done in conjunction with them because they really want to adopt it and like see what's the best ways to use it. I think that's really amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And I think we need that to happen more broadly across across school systems. I think this is happening also. It is happening across the world, though. And I see this enthusiasm in other countries and an openness to this in many ways.
Yeah. And I suppose let's take user numbers away. What is success going to look like for LearnLM, for AI in education from a Google point of view?
I think many things, right? First of all, people have to, fundamentally, people have to find the products useful for their use cases. And the products are different. So LearnLM builds in some fundamental pedagogical concepts into its basis. And also, Gemini 2.5 is really accurate. It's by far the most accurate model we've ever had. And in the industry, you can see it on the leaderboards.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that underlies how we are using AI in all of our products. But each product has a different goal, right? So success for Classroom to me is a couple of things, but one of them is like teachers saving time, honestly. And there's so much teacher burnout that like if teachers can save time, then their lives could be easier. I think I talked to a lot of teachers who said, who had a dream of what teaching meant when they went into teaching. But the reality was very different because of just the sheer workload. So if we can reduce that, and we've seen like great experiments in Ireland with working with teachers and so on, of like this a sheer reduction in work. And then I think that's one part of it. The second thing is the school administrators. Can they identify what's working, what's not? Can they identify groups of students? And the third thing, of course, in that context is the students. Now, if I go to YouTube, it's the users and the creators, right? How do both of them interact with AI? We want both of them to succeed, right? How do the creators have the best tools of AI? And how do users actually turn something into an active process that might have been passive before, right? So they're learning more. And it's focused and result oriented. And then, whether it's in Gemini, it's much more broad. So it's a larger spectrum. NotebookLM, I got a certain corpus. So each of them, I think success means satisfying the user needs that product is trying to achieve, right? Yeah. And the success will follow from that success, which is defined for the product, right? It's the adoption of Classroom and the success of Classroom in classes and in institutions. It is the use of YouTube by educators and by by creators, by educators, and by students. That's success there, right? So it's different in different contexts.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I think. Let's say, like you guys have been working on LLMs for a long time, probably more than any other company, and
we invented them.
Yeah. And so you guys knew about this technology. You guys have been working on it for a long time, and therefore I'm assuming that you're working on things that we might not hear about until 5-10 years time down the line. So if I come back to Google I/O in 5 years time, what do now you don't have to give me any insights into actual things you're working on, but I suppose just your opinion, what learning tools are you going to be showcasing? And do you think they're going to be radically different to the more linear types of innovation we're seeing today?
I'll predict in the future, of course, a fool's errand, because there's so much change happening so rapidly. Yeah. And I'm biased right now. Let me give you one example though, because I'm biased because I just came from a demo of these glasses.
Yes,
glasses.
I did it yesterday.
Yeah, and it's really fantastic, right? And one thing I've seen in the context of schools is that many of these things that are more immersive actually get students engaged in a very different way. So my hope would be that these multimodal ways of interacting with information are at the fore, the Search Live stuff or Gemini Live, right? The ways of interacting with the world around you. Like Lens is the beginning of that path, but you can see it getting richer. Oh, like my conversation in the car I had a conversation, I was trying to listening to this book, right? And you can see all the pieces of this. So I was listening to this book about mitochondria. And it said something about like how, there were no cell wall. It was like, okay, how does a cell work without a cell wall? And it made no sense to me, right? So I paused and asked Gemini the question live, right? And I got this answer about like what the nature of a cell wall is and what it's called a cell wall in plants is different than what happens in animals. And so it's not called a cell wall, but, it's just a technical difference in how it's described. Right. So you can see that my interaction with a book has become something very different, but patched together. Yeah. Now, my hope would be that kind of interaction becomes much more of the norm of like getting bodies of information and then being able to interact with it in a fluid way.
Yeah. Yeah. I was with your product team earlier, and I genuinely, after trying the glasses yesterday, and I've been wearing the Meta Ray-Bans for about a year now as well. And I do think, maybe the one-to-one device is not the Chromebook in a few years' time. Maybe it's the glasses. Maybe it's the...
I think my experience in the past is like all of these things end up having a place. Yeah. Because there are times when you want to consume information in a focused way, and, reading is very fast. Reading and skimming is very fast. You have to listen at like 3 times the speed to get the same speed as read, at least for me, same speed as reading. Yeah. I've done that with novels and it's okay. And people around me get annoyed if you do it. So, but I think, so and there's ability to skip, there's ability to pause. So there's values in reading in that way, right? Yeah. That are hard to quite capture in the audio mode. There are other contexts where audio is a more natural way for me to absorb information. So I actually feel there'll be a place for lots of different devices. Yeah. What we have seen is...
But imagine being able to switch. So you've got
Yeah.
you're reading a book. And
to
you
something
start, if
different.
you're like me, after 20 minutes, I start to feel tired.
Yeah.
And then, it's just getting old. And I'm able to go, right, can you take over? And then I have a break. It reads to me, and then I jump back in.
I actually do that today with I read a book and then I go to the audio version when I'm on my car,
Right.
and then and then come back to reading it again when I'm able to read it. And so I find that mode switching is really quite powerful, and so I see that as being quite a fundamental.
Yeah, I do see that. I agree. I think there's something there about. I know we talk about these glasses as being kind of assistants, but there's not much of a leap between assistant and tutor. There's a
modality that's a bit different.
Yeah, but I suppose maybe similar to Gemini, to LearnLM.
Yeah,
and so if you say had a pair of these glasses with LearnLM integrated and were education proof and all of that, and then you're sitting in your class, you learn some things. You've got it set up so after dinner tonight, it fires some questions to help embed the learning
in your spaced repetition over time.
Exactly, retrieval practice, all that kind of thing. So I think that gets exciting.
Yeah.
That gets really exciting.
Yeah.
And it puts the agency into the student's hand in terms of, I'll answer these questions.
And I think the agency maintains the curiosity too.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the keeping curiosity alive is really fundamental, I think. Right. That instinct.
Let's say Google sacked you tomorrow. You went and got a job as a teacher. You got your first class. You got your semester all planned out. You're the guy who worked on AI at Google and learning. So everyone's like, this guy's going to bring some AI with him here. What would you do?
That's a really interesting question. I've been a TA in grad school,
right?
Which is the closest I've come to being a teacher. I think the fundamental question of motivating people remains the same. Of why are you learning what you're learning? And I still remember lectures I got. The first lecture in school, we had economics. I still remember the first class on economics of what is the purpose of economics and what is it about? Right? There's this priest who taught us, who went through that. I still remember the Socratic thing. I remember another class where somebody was teaching us history, and he set up a setup and said, "What do you think will happen?" I remember my chemistry teacher, his introduction into chemistry. So I think that first thing of the motivation I would see as my first job, why is this exciting? Why would you want to know this?
Yeah.
Why would it change something in your mind, if not your life?
Yeah.
If you knew this. And if you can't answer that question, then it becomes harder to do everything else that comes after. Right. And I think, so that's what I strive to do. I'm not an educator, so I don't know how I do that well, but I think that's the question I'd strive to answer. And then all the tools coming in to help the student pursue that.
Yeah.
I mean, success to me would be if the students are going ahead of me, right? That would be amazing.
And that's interesting because and I think you describe in the next few years of education and students having interactions with the content.
Yeah.
Almost, it's going to make the traditional educator have to almost accept that they're not necessarily the authority in the room when it comes to this content, because they're going to have to co-learn almost with the student. If the student is able to go down different paths and learn different things that might not be a speciality for that teacher and so on. And that's a big mind shift in education.
I think that's even true to some extent today in many ways, right? Because you have access to the whole web and then ask questions about the web. And so there's some element of that where you can really get engagement that happens, where the teacher is learning along with the student. And I think there's something wonderful in that process. I don't know what it feels like to a teacher, as I'm not one, but I think that is, in school too, we did all these projects, right? And they were often pushed in directions where, in chemistry, I had this very inspiring teacher, and he would encourage us to do these projects, but he'd send us off to college. There's somebody better there who can teach this to you, and then come back with it, right? And then do the project. And that, I think, is sort of the promise of what that could look like, of really engaging learning.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you there. And I just worry about the schools, especially the more traditional schools, who are still relying on the old model, and we'll have a bigger hurdle to get over, I think. Ben, it's amazing to chat with you. Thanks for taking the time.
It's been such a pleasure.
Cheers. Thank you.
Cheers.
If you like this podcast, please consider writing a review on your podcast app and sharing it on your socials. Thank you. I am excited to announce that my new book, Infinite Education, The 4-Step Strategy for Leading Change in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, is now available in paperback and ebook. It has become a #1 bestseller in 4 categories on Amazon. Sandra Ruffo, the president of the New York State Schools Board, described it as a visionary manifesto. The historian Sir Anthony Selden explained it as a compelling vision. Legendary education pioneer Sugata Mitra urged educators to read the book. He said, "This book will make you think about the issue and ask the right questions." Find out more and get the book at www.infiniteeducation.ai.